Welcome to Crushed Husband. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin. There's a particular stillness to mornings in the desert, the kind where you can hear your own joints creak before the coffee maker does. That was my rhythm. That was my life. My name is Lionel Wexler. I'm 82 years old, retired, and I live in a one-story Adobe-style home in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. Folks call it T or C. Nothing much happens here, and I like it that way. Most days start the same. Up by 5:30, 2 eggs over easy, 1 slice of wheat toast, half a grapefruit. Then the crosswords with a pot of coffee until about 9. On Mondays, I vacuum. On Tuesdays, I dust. That morning was a Wednesday. I remember because I had just sat down to work on my jigsaw puzzle, one of those vintage National Park posters, when a strange vehicle rumbled up my driveway. That was the first clue. I heard it before I saw it. Tires crunching gravel. Not the mail truck, not Dolores and her Subaru. This one had a hum. Expensive. I pulled back the curtain. It was a rental SUV, metallic silver, with Arizona plates. The second clue. Then I saw them. My son, Matthew, tall and tense, stepping out of the passenger side. And behind the wheel, Sheila, his wife, or partner, or whatever she preferred to be called now. I hadn't seen either of them in over a year. They hadn't called. I stayed behind the curtain a moment longer. I watched Matthew stretch his legs, look around like he was casing the place. Sheila got out slower, adjusting her sunglasses and smoothing down her blouse like she was prepping for a performance. Something about the way they moved put me on edge. Too careful, too deliberate. I opened the door before they could knock. Well, I said, leaning against the frame. Look what the sand blew in. Sheila was all teeth. Hi, Lionel. We were just driving through and thought, why not surprise you? Matthew hovered beside her, hands in his pockets. Hey, Dad. I stepped aside. Come in then. It's only been what, 13 months? Sheila gave a polite laugh. Has it really been that long? They entered like they were afraid to touch anything. Sheila complimented the tile floors. Matthew asked if the air conditioning still worked. They sat on the edge of the sofa like it might bite them. How have you been, Dad? Matthew asked, crossing one leg over the other. Still vertical, I said. And you two? Oh, same old, Sheila said, waving a hand. We've just been swamped. Work's been brutal. Sure, I said. There was a long pause. Matthew glanced around like he was searching for something, or making sure something was still there. Sheila leaned forward, her hands folded neatly on her lap. You've kept everything so neat, she said. Living out here by yourself, it's impressive. I sipped my coffee. Routine helps. Matthew nodded. And your health? You've been to the doctor lately? Checkups every 6 months. Blood pressure's fine. Still driving. Still cooking. Still paying my own bills. Sheila exchanged a quick look with Matthew. That's really great, Lionel. We just worry, You haven't called in over a year, I said. That's an odd way to worry. They both went quiet. Then Sheila said, too brightly, We thought we'd stay the night, make up for lost time. I stared at them. No offense, I said, but last time you stayed, you left before breakfast. Matthew smiled like it hurt. We've changed. Really? Sheila nodded. We even thought we might cook dinner tonight, give you a break. That was when it clicked. These two weren't here for a visit. This wasn't nostalgia or guilt or even decency. No, this was something else entirely. Something they were rehearsing. I looked between them. I could smell it now. Not just Sheila's perfume or Matthew's aftershave. Something sour, like fear covered in charm. I sat back in my chair and smiled. All right, I said. Stay the night. Dinner sounds nice. But in my head, the alarm bells were already ringing. Matthew and Sheila made themselves comfortable fast. Too fast for a couple that hadn't stepped foot in my house since the 4th of July, the year before. I watched them move through the place like home appraisers, not family. Sheila had taken it upon herself to do a little tidying while Matthew disappeared into the spare room. She picked up the coasters and wiped under them with her sleeve, shifted my pill organizer an inch to the left. I didn't say anything, just watched her from my recliner with the puzzle board on my lap and a mug of lukewarm coffee sweating on the side table. You don't have a railing in your shower, do you? She asked suddenly. I blinked. What for? Well, these tiles are so slick, she said, walking to the bathroom doorway and peeking in. If you were to fall, no one would know. I haven't fallen, I said, and if I did, I'd call Dolores. She's across the street. Sheila nodded like that was cute. Still. I looked back down at the puzzle. Arches National Park. I'd been there once in the 70s, before Matthew was even born. It felt farther away now than it had back then. Matthew reappeared carrying a laundry basket full of folded towels. You always keep this much bleach in the linen closet? That's where I store it, I said. Why? No reason, he said, setting the basket down and rubbing his neck. Just thinking maybe you shouldn't be lifting heavy jugs like that. It was bleach, not cinder blocks. They sat with me for a bit, offering comments on the puzzle like they were trying to bond. Sheila asked if I still drove into town myself. Matthew asked about my prescriptions. Then came the questions about bills, maintenance, heating, all of it coded in concern, but the kind that sweated through its shirt. Have you considered installing one of those medical alert bracelets? Sheila asked. No, I said. I haven't considered getting hit by a meteor either. She smiled. Just thinking about the future, that's all. Well, I said, when the future gets here, it can knock like everyone else. There was a beat of silence. Then Matthew clapped his hands lightly and stood. So, hey, he said, we were thinking we could cook tonight. Cook? I repeated. Yeah, Sheila said. You sit back and relax. We'll take care of everything. I stared at them. You're going to cook in my kitchen? I asked. Sheila laughed. Why does that sound like a threat? I didn't answer. It wasn't the cooking that bothered me. It was the effort, the charm, the way they moved around each other like a team rehearsing a sales pitch. They made pasta, the kind from a box with sauce from a jar and prepackaged salad. They didn't eat much of it, said they were tired from the drive, said they'd eaten lunch late, said they were just happy to be here. Later, after I'd washed the dishes myself, because apparently the offer didn't extend to cleanup, Matthew unrolled a sleeping bag on the couch and Sheila took the guest room. It'll be nice, she said, smoothing the blanket. We want to spend real time with you, Lionel. I nodded and went to my bedroom, closing the door behind me. They weren't here to spend time with me. They were here to study the battlefield. I tried to sleep. I really did. But it was one of those nights where the air felt too still, too thick, like the desert was holding its breath. I laid there in the dark, hands folded on my stomach, listening to the old wall clock tick in the hallway, the kind of silence that lets every little creak crawl under your skin. From the other end of the house, a faint murmur broke through. Muffled voices. I glanced at the red glow of the clock, just past midnight. I slipped out of bed without turning on the light. The floor was cool against my bare feet. I moved down the hallway like a ghost, slow and quiet. The living room lamp was on, low and yellow, casting long shadows against the stucco walls. I heard them clearly once I reached the corner. We can't wait much longer, Sheila was saying. Her voice was low but crisp, like she didn't care if someone heard. I know, Matthew replied. I just didn't expect him to be this lucid. Lucid? Sheila scoffed. He made a puzzle and reheated old stew. That's not independence, that's survival. If we wait too long, we'll lose the deposit. I felt my fingers curl into a fist. Matthew sighed. You think he suspects? No, she said. He's polite, suspicious maybe, but he's still stuck in that nice old man mode. We just have to get the paperwork signed while he's still cooperative. And if he doesn't? We nudge it, she said casually. You know how it works, slippery slope stuff. Suggest a nurse, suggest he's forgetting things. Then present Mesa wins like it's a blessing. Mesa wins. The name hit me like a brick. I'd seen the brochures. They mailed them to folks in town, all glossy smiles and pictures of blue skies and massage chairs. They called it a wellness community. Everyone else called it a waiting room with a yoga class. I've already spoken to the intake coordinator, Sheila went on. They can hold the spot for 10 more days. After that, we lose our preferred room. The corner unit. You already paid? Partial, she said. $5,000. And I'm telling you, once he's in, the rest is easy. He won't fight it. He's tired. He just doesn't know it yet. Matthew was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, and the house? I could almost hear Sheila smile. Once he's placed, we file for guardianship. We show the court he's declining. Then we liquidate the property, move the car, consolidate the accounts. My heart thumped loud in my ears. I leaned back into the shadow of the hallway. You think the old man's got more money than he lets on? Matthew asked. I know he does, she said. He's got no mortgage, no debt, no real expenses. And that motorcycle, I looked it up. If it's in working shape, it's worth 20 grand easy. You already looked it up? He said. Of course I did, she said, like he should be impressed. A silence followed, then a clinking of ice in glass. I don't know, Matthew said, voice low. It just feels... What? Wrong? Sheila said. It's not wrong. It's smart. He's not living. He's decaying. We're just making decisions he should have made years ago. I turned away, carefully, slowly. My bedroom felt colder when I returned. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring into the dark. They didn't come for me. They came for the leftovers. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel old. I felt hunted. And that was the night I decided, they may think I'm weak. They may think I'm slow. But they forgot one thing. I used to make maps for a living, and I still know how to find the exits. I waited until morning. Matthew and Sheila were still asleep, curled in separate corners of the house, as if even their shared schemes couldn't make them share a bed. I crept into the kitchen, made a pot of coffee like I always did, and wrote a note on the back of an old envelope. Taking a walk. Don't wait on me. By 7:30, I was across the street, knocking on Dolores's door. She answered in her robe with curlers in her hair, and a cigarette already burning between her fingers. Well, if it ain't the cartographer himself, she said, stepping aside. Come on in before the sun tries to murder us. Dolores had lived next door for 38 years. She made the best pecan pie in Sierra County and had no tolerance for nonsense. We'd shared more holiday leftovers and garage sale coffee mugs than I could count. I sat at her kitchen table, hands wrapped around a warm mug. I need to ask you something, I said. She squinted at me, then lit another cigarette off the end of the first. This about those vultures staying at your place? That got my attention. You've noticed? Honey, I noticed before they parked that fancy rental in your driveway. Sheila hasn't stopped looking at your house like it's a damn listing on Zillow. I exhaled. I heard them talking last night. They're trying to put me in some place called Mesa Winds. Already started the paperwork. Dolores's eyes narrowed, her jaw tightening. That's so? Yeah, called it a wellness resort. Said they'd liquidate the house and car once I was in. She didn't blink. You ever hear me mention my daughter Carla? Sure. She's head nurse admin over at Mesa Winds. She's the one who writes the intake evaluations before folks even set foot in the building. Dolores got up, pulled out her landline, and punched in a number without hesitation. Let's see what she knows. 10 minutes later, Carla called back. Dolores put her on speaker. Hey, Mama, what's up? Got a quick question, Dolores said. You got a patient intake form started for a Lionel Wexler? Lives across the street from me. There was a short pause on the line. Then Carla said, Yeah, came in 3 days ago. Relative named Matthew filled out the forms online. There's even a deposit flagged. $5 grand, non-refundable. I closed my eyes, pressing 2 fingers to my temple. They already scheduled a provisional placement, Carla went on. Says he's showing early signs of dementia and can't manage the house safely on his own. Dolores looked at me, then back at the phone. Any idea who authorized that? Not him, Carla said. The son submitted a power of attorney form. Looked real slick, too. Notarized in Tucson last week. But something about it felt off. Dolores thanked her and hung up. I sat there in silence for a long moment. They're moving fast, I said, trying to box me in before I even know the game started. Well, they're about to learn you ain't the game, Lionel, Dolores said, slapping her palm on the table. You're the board, I chuckled despite myself. I need legal help, someone I trust. She snapped her fingers. That friend of yours, what's his name? The one with the beard who used to argue about zoning laws over whiskey? Arlo Gaines, I said. Haven't seen him in years. Bet he still keeps a bottle and a grudge, she smirked. You call him, today. I did. Arlo answered on the second ring, his voice raspy but sharp. When I explained what was happening, he didn't ask why or how. He just said, pack a lunch and bring the deed. We've got work to do. I hung up the phone, my pulse steady now. The fog was gone. Matthew and Sheila thought I'd crumble, that I'd just hand over the keys and thank them for the favor. But they'd forgotten something important. I spent 40 years drawing maps for people who were lost. Now it was their turn. Arlo and I worked fast. Within 48 hours, I had done more in town than I'd done in the last 10 years. That's the thing about being underestimated. People don't watch you too closely. They don't notice when you're moving pieces off the board. The first thing to go was the house. I called Ellie Ruiz, a retired teacher who used to run the children's reading hour at the library. Her nephew had just moved to T or C with his wife and their baby, looking to buy a quiet place off the main road. I offered it at a fair price. A good one, actually, with one condition: no signs, no agents, and the deed had to be filed through Arlo. By Thursday, the paperwork was signed. Then came the motorcycle. A 1958 Triumph Thunderbird, sky blue with cream trim. I'd rebuilt it twice, repainted it once, and never let the tank go dry. It was the last thing I truly indulged in after Martha died. She used to say it sounded like a lawnmower chewing rocks, but she loved seeing me happy. I posted it in a private collector's forum. Took less than 6 hours for a man from Phoenix to drive down with a trailer and cash in hand. He shook my hand with both of his like he'd won the lottery. "Promise me one thing," I said. "Name it. Don't let it rot in a showroom." He nodded solemnly. "I'm gonna ride it all the way up the coast next spring. I'll send you a postcard." He left with the bike, and I stood in the driveway long after the trailer disappeared behind the hills, holding my helmet like a memory. With Arlo's help, I closed every bank account Matthew might have found in his little online snooping sessions. Moved everything into a private vault and fireproof lockbox tied to a trust in my own name. Not the fake one Matthew had slipped into the Mesa Winds paperwork, the real one, sealed and notarized with Arlo's pen. I left no trail they could follow, no accounts to freeze, no bills to forward. Just a P.O. box key and a lawyer who owed me more favors than I could count. Then came the last piece, the inheritance. Not the kind they were hoping for. Not keys or deeds or stock certificates. Numbered. This inheritance came in a cardboard box. Inside it, I placed 3 items. The first, Matthew's Cub Scout badge sash. Still wrinkled from that summer, he refused to iron it. I pinned a post-it to it that read, "You used to know what honor meant." The second, a Matchbox car. A rust-red '71 Dodge Charger he'd begged for on a road trip to Santa Fe. I found it in the back of my closet, still scratched from the time he'd hurled it at a wall during a tantrum. I stuck another note on it. "You always wanted the fast way." And the third, a photo. The 3 of us, me, Matthew, and Martha, taken the day we brought him home from college freshman year. We're smiling, sunburned, arms around each other. The back of it now read, "This is where I stopped recognizing you." I sealed the box and set it aside. Then I sat down at the old oak desk in my bedroom and wrote the letter, the one he'd never be able to unread. I told him I loved him, that I always had, even when he made it hard. I told him I'd tried to believe he'd grown into someone decent, but decent men didn't trick their fathers into losing their lives piece by piece. I ended it with one line. "You forgot I was watching the whole time." By the time the sun set that evening, the house was nearly empty, the cash was stored, and the new deed was filed. Let Matthew and Sheila come for me. They wouldn't find an old man. They'd find a ghost with nothing left to steal. The performance began with a limp, just a slight shuffle of my right leg, enough to make Matthew's eyes flick toward my feet every time I crossed a room. Then I started asking where I'd left my glasses, even when they were sitting right there on the table. By the 3rd day, I had Sheila offering to cut up my chicken. "Oh, let me help you, Lionel," she said, sliding the plate toward her like she was being generous. "Don't strain your wrists." I thanked her with a tired smile and made my hand tremble just a little when I picked up my fork. They fell for it so fast it almost made me sad. Almost. By the weekend, I was taking naps in the middle of the day, leaving the TV on static and letting the crossword sit unfinished. The same man who once mapped river basins in Central America now stared at the ceiling like he couldn't count past Tuesday. Sheila hovered more. Matthew, less so. He mostly paced the house, looking at documents on his phone, muttering about deadlines and next steps. They had begun whispering again at night, only this time I didn't need to eavesdrop. I already knew the ending. They thought they'd won. And so, when they came to me with the folder, I let my hands shake. "We just want to help, Dad," Matthew said, sliding the paperwork across the kitchen table. "We talked with the admissions team at Mesa Winds. They're ready whenever you are." "I'm not a burden," I said, voice soft. "I just get tired lately." "You're not a burden," Sheila chimed in quickly. "You're just ready for a little peace and quiet. You've earned that." I stared down at the stack of forms. Health proxy, power of attorney, consent to relocate, all polished and legal, all wrapped in that gentle tone that only shows up when someone's gutting you with a butter knife. "Just sign here, okay?" Matthew said. I reached for the pen, let my fingers twitch, fumbled it once, picked it up again with both hands and scrawled my name slowly, crooked and uneven, like I was writing underwater. They watched every stroke like it was a finish line. When I dotted the last I, Matthew exhaled and leaned back. "Good," he said, almost to himself. "That's good." Sheila clapped her hands once. "I'll call Mesa Winds. They'll schedule transport for Tuesday." I nodded. "Tuesday's fine." Matthew patted my shoulder. "You'll love it there." I gave a small, vacant smile. After they left to get lunch in town, I got up, straightened my back, rolled my shoulder. My limp disappeared the moment the door closed. Within minutes, I was on the phone with Dolores' daughter, Carla. "It's done," I told her. "They think I'm halfway to the grave," she snorted. "Mesa Winds has a private wing we can use. No one will ask questions." "Good," I said. "I'll check in under the name we discussed. Arlo's taking care of the rest." "Let me guess," she said. "They think those documents are legally binding?" "They are," I said. "Just not in the way they expect." Matthew thought he had the power of attorney. What he had was a copy Arlo gave him, identical in look, but stripped of actual legal teeth. The real one, notarized 2 weeks earlier, named me sole executor of my estate and authorized no transfers without my direct approval. By the time they came back with takeout bags and smug faces, I was already packing for the stay they thought they'd forced on me. Let them think I was fading. Let them think I was compliant. The next move would be mine, and they wouldn't see it coming. I left just before dawn. Carla met me at the back entrance of Mesa Winds, hair tied up, clipboard in hand, like we were staging a medical transfer. She'd arranged everything: private checkout, a fake patient discharge code, even a ride waiting behind the staff parking lot. Arlo sat in the passenger seat of a beige sedan with a coffee and a map folded in his lap, like we were heading out for a weekend fishing trip. "Still sure about this?" Carla asked as she handed me a plain duffel bag. I zipped it closed. "I'm not just sure," I said. "I'm ready." By the time Matthew and Sheila showed up at my house that afternoon, or what used to be my house, I was already halfway across the state line, the wind in my ears and my phone turned off for good. I'd left the front door unlocked. Matthew went in first. Sheila followed close behind, her phone already out, probably ready to post some triumphant moving day photo once they'd declared victory. But they stopped in the doorway. The living room was bare, the walls empty. No bookshelves, no couch, no maps on the walls. Just sunlight bouncing off a clean floor and a box sitting in the center of the room with their names taped to the lid. "What the hell?" Matthew muttered, stepping inside. Sheila opened the kitchen cabinets, empty, the fridge unplugged. She turned around, blinking, mouth opening to say something, but too stunned to follow through. On the counter sat a single manila envelope. Inside it, a copy of the letter I'd written Matthew, the real notarized power of attorney, naming myself, and only myself. A small key labeled P.O. Box 118, and a thumb drive. They didn't notice the camera mounted above the doorframe until it was too late. Arlo had suggested it, just a little insurance. The footage caught everything: Matthew cursing, Sheila pacing in circles. The moment they opened the box and pulled out the sash, the toy car, the photo. Sheila read the post-it notes aloud, voice shaking. "You used to know what honor meant. You always wanted the fast way." And then, the last one, the photo of the three of us. "This is where I stopped recognizing you." Matthew didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he threw the box across the room. It hit the floor with a dull thud. Sheila kicked it once, then walked into the hallway, like maybe there'd be a secret stash of valuables hidden behind a closet door. There wasn't. The deed had been transferred. The house had new owners. The accounts were closed, the assets secured, the fake paperwork null and void. There was nothing left to take. They stood in the living room like two people who'd shown up to a party and found the house already condemned. I watched it all on the security feed from a borrowed laptop in a quiet diner 2 towns over. Arlo sat across from me, sipping his coffee, one eyebrow raised. "Nice touch with the mementos," he said. "They wanted an inheritance," I said, shutting the laptop. I gave them one. We didn't speak for a while after that. Outside the diner, the sun was setting over red hills and Joshua trees. A freight train rumbled through in the distance. I felt something loosen in my chest, something that had been knotted there for years. Grief, maybe. Or maybe it was just the quiet kind of satisfaction that comes from finally getting the last word. They'd come to take everything. And found nothing but a story they didn't write. I folded up the letter one last time, slipped it into my coat pocket, and nodded to Arlo. "Let's go," I said. "Time to put a pin in the map." We headed west. Arlo drove the first leg, hands steady on the wheel, sunglasses perched on the end of his nose. I rode in silence beside him, the desert shrinking in the rearview mirror, the map of my old life slowly folding in on itself. We didn't talk much. Didn't need to. By the time we reached California, the air had changed. It smelled like salt and pine, old docks and wind-polished sand. We pulled into a sleepy coastal town called Shelter Bluff, population just under 400. A grocery store, a barber, a post office, and one diner with a cracked sign that just said, "Food." It was perfect. Arlo had a cottage there, said it used to belong to a cousin who passed years ago. Tucked behind a ridge of coastal shrubs and a leaning white fence, the house looked like something out of a storybook. Pale blue trim, creaky front steps, wind chimes made of spoons. "This'll do?" Arlo asked as he unlocked the door. "It'll more than do," I said. We settled in easy. Mornings started with black coffee and the sound of gulls. Afternoons, we sat on the back porch with a chessboard between us, the ocean beyond the grass line muttering like an old friend. I bought a pair of walking shoes, learned the rhythm of the tides, found a bench near the marina that faced west, and held my quiet better than any chapel ever could. No more puzzles, no more alarms, no more watching my back, just peace. Some days, I missed the hum of New Mexico, the rust-red dust, the heat rising off the pavement like breath. I missed Martha, especially. She would have loved it here. The open sky, the sea thrift in bloom, the bakery that serves cinnamon buns the size of dinner plates. I talked to her most evenings, not out loud, just in my head. The way you do when silence becomes something sacred. I'd tell her what I'd seen that day. A boat being repainted, a kid chasing a crab up the pier, Arlo spilling his lemonade on a bishop and trying to blame the wind. She would have laughed at that. 3 weeks after we arrived, I got a letter. It came to the P.O. box in town. No return address, no stamp. Just my name on the front in heavy black ink. Inside, a clipping from a local business journal, a headline in bold, "Local financial advisor placed on leave amid investigation." Below it, a photo of Matthew, eyes hollow, tie askew. The article mentioned something about misrepresentation, client losses, and a suspension from the regional bank. I showed it to Arlo. He didn't say anything, just folded the paper, lit a match, and dropped it in the old tin pail we used for trash. "Want to talk about it?" he asked. "No," I said. I didn't call, didn't write, didn't ask what happened to Sheila or if the bank had cleaned him out the way he tried to clean out me. That part of the map was done. Instead, I walked down to the bench by the marina and sat facing the sea. The waves rolled in and rolled out, just like always. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the last photo I had of Martha, her in the garden, hair wild from the wind, hands buried in soil. "I made it," I whispered. "We made it." I folded the picture back into my chest pocket and leaned into the wind. For the first time in a long, long while, I didn't feel betrayed or bitter or afraid. I just felt free.